Let me ask you something before we begin. You have most certainly had an argument, or at least a strong opinion, about God, religion, faith, or the lack of it. Most people have. And if you have, you were in good company. Some of the sharpest minds in the world have devoted entire careers to exactly these questions. Believers who can quote scripture in 4 languages, atheists who can dismantle every theological argument ever made, scientists, philosophers, historians, psychologists, all weighing in with considerable force and often considerable intelligence. And yet there is one question that none of them ask. Not the believers, not the atheists, not the rationalists I most admire, not once. I want to show you what that question is. And I want to warn you in advance. It is so simple that your first instinct would be to dismiss it. Please do not, because once it lands, it does not leave. Believers point to scripture, to personal experience, to the order and beauty of the cosmos. Atheists point to reason, to evidence, to the long and well-documented history of damage done in the name of religion. Both sides are clear. Both sides are often sincere. And the argument goes around and around, gaining heat but not much light, because both sides are doing the same thing without realizing it. They are arguing about objects, about things seen, things believed, things rejected, things experienced, and nobody on either side has stopped to ask about the one who was doing the seeing, the believing, the rejecting, the experiencing. Think of a person who is heavily intoxicated. He perceives the world around him in a certain way, and from inside that state, his perceptions feel entirely real. Now, sober people around him can argue endlessly what he is seeing, whether his interpretations are correct or mistaken, whether the things he perceives are real or not. But none of that argument actually helps him. What helps him is sobering up. Once he is sober, his perception corrects itself naturally. The problem was never really about what he was seeing. The problem was the state from which he was seeing it. This is precisely the point that Vedanta has been making for thousands of years. And it is the point that almost every modern argument about God and religion quietly steps around. Before asking whether God exists or does not exist, before accepting or rejecting religion, before believing or disbelieving anything at all, there is one fact that every single person in this conversation, on every side of it, shares equally. And it is so obvious, so constantly present, that it almost never gets noticed. Right now, in this very moment, you are aware of these words, aware of whatever thought is arising as you hear them, aware of agreement or resistance, aware of doubt, of curiosity, of boredom, of interest. Whatever position you hold about God or religion or reason, that position is arising within awareness. Even the most committed atheist in the very act of denial is aware of denying. Even the most devout believer is aware of believing. And yet this awareness, the one thing in which every single human experience without exception takes place, is the one thing nobody stops to examine. This is where Vedanta begins. The word Vedanta itself means the end of the Vedas, and that is not merely a figure of speech. The Vedic tradition moves through 4 distinct stages: the Samhitas, which are hymns to the forces of nature, the Brahmanas, which codify those into ritual and method, the Aranyakas, which turn inward toward reflection and philosophical inquiry, and finally the Upanishads, which are Vedanta itself, where self-enquiry takes absolute priority and the non-dual truth of existence is pursued through rigorous elimination of everything that is not the self. It does not begin by asking you to believe anything. No joining, no worship, no prior acceptance of doctrine. It begins with a single uncompromising question. And so the question Vedanta places before every person, regardless of what they believe or do not believe, is not about the object of belief at all. Not what do I believe, but who is the one believing? Not what do I reject, but who is the one rejecting? A person may say, quite honestly, that he does not believe in God. Another may say, with equal sincerity, that she does. Vedanta does not quarrel with either position. It simply asks both of them the same question. Who is the I that believes or does not believe? Is it the body? The body has changed continuously from childhood through this present moment, and yet the sense of I has remained constant throughout. Is it the mind? The mind shifts every day. Thoughts arrive and dissolve. Moods arise and fall. Opinions that once felt certain give way to new ones. Memories blur and fade. And still, underneath all of that movement, something remains that simply says, I am. Not I am so-and-so, or I am this or that, but simply, I am. Is it perhaps a belief system? But belief systems change too. Believers become skeptics, skeptics become seekers. But through every change, the sense of being remains untouched. So what exactly is this I? This is why Vedanta has no quarrel with reason. It welcomes reason entirely. It does not ask the intellect to stand down. It asks the intellect to do something far more demanding than turning outward, to turn inward and examine itself. A scientist studies the outer world. A philosopher studies thought. A psychologist studies behavior and the movements of the mind. Vedanta asks us to study the very sense of I to which all experience without exception appears. That is not blind belief. It is the most intimate investigation possible. The atheist cannot deny awareness because the denial itself is known within awareness. The believer is in the same position because belief too is something that arises within awareness, not something that stands outside it. And the most rigorous thinker cannot grasp awareness as an object because awareness is precisely that by which every object is known. The eye through which you see can see a great many things, but it cannot see itself directly. The mind can think about a great many things, but the witness of the mind is always subtler than any thought the mind can produce. When you get a sudden idea, don't you say something occurred to me? What occurred to whom? A thought wave occurred in awareness. This is why the question, who am I, is not a casual question, not a slogan, not a line of poetry. It's a method, a way of turning attention from the changing to the changeless, from the object to the subject, from the noise of argument to something considerably quieter and more fundamental. When I say I am angry, anger is known. When I say I am sad, sadness is known. When I say I do not believe, disbelief is known. When I say I believe, belief is known. What is known keeps changing, but that by which all of it is known does not change. Vedanta calls it the light of awareness, and its entire purpose is simply to help you recognize it. The deepest question then is not which label a person carries, whether one calls oneself religious or secular, spiritual or rational, traditional or modern. The label is not the issue. The issue is whether the one who carries this label has ever been examined. Because without knowing who I am, my belief is incomplete. Without knowing who I am, my disbelief is equally incomplete. Without knowing who I am, my intelligence, however considerable, remains pointed entirely in the wrong direction. Vedanta does not demand belief as a starting point. It asks only for inquiry, not fearful inquiry, not credulous inquiry, but clear-eyed, honest inquiry that begins with the one fact immediately and undeniably available: I am aware. From there, the questions follow naturally. Who is this I? What changes and what does not? What is known and what is the knower? What is thought and what is the witness of thought? When these questions are pursued sincerely, Vedanta ceases to be a theory. It becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, the loud arguments of belief and disbelief begin gradually to fall quiet. Not because they were silenced, but because the ground they were standing on turns out to be less solid than either side supposed. The real issue was never whether you believe in something outside you. The real issue is whether you ever truly understood the one who says I. Shloka 438 from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita is one of my favorites. There is nothing more purifying than knowledge. One who is perfect in yoga finds that knowledge in the self in due course of time. Yoga means being perfect at maintaining inner equanimity even while diligently performing one's duties. This tells us plainly that the highest state of understanding can be reached only through one's own efforts of study, reflection, and analysis. Nobody else can do it for you. No one. May the light of knowledge shine upon the world, and may there be goodness and peace everywhere. Thank you.